You're just a burden to this family, my sister sneered as she took over my room. Nobody wants you here anyway, her husband added. I packed quietly. The next morning, their perfect life crumbled. I first sensed something was off when I heard hushed whispers drifting from the kitchen at 2 a.m. Moving back in with my parents at 28 wasn't ideal, but after Dad's stroke 8 months ago, it was the right thing to do. Mom had to keep working for the insurance, and someone needed to be home with him. Since I worked remotely, it made sense. That night, I had gone downstairs for a glass of water when I caught the sound of my sister Ivy and her husband, Adrian, speaking in hushed tones. Their visits were rare, maybe once every few weeks, so finding them in the kitchen in the dead of night was strange. I hesitated at the foot of the stairs, debating whether to make my presence known. "The market's perfect right now," Adrian murmured. "We just need to convince them it's the best option for everyone." "Sebastian's the problem," Ivy replied. "He's always been Dad's favorite, you know how they are." I froze, glass in hand, feeling like I had stumbled into something I wasn't meant to hear. Their tone reminded me of childhood, when Ivy would scheme to get what she wanted from our parents. The next morning at breakfast, they were all smiles. Mom was making pancakes, her way of keeping things normal since Dad's stroke, when Ivy cleared her throat. "So we have some news," she announced, reaching for Adrian's hand. "We're selling our house." Mom nearly dropped the spatula. "Selling? But you love that house." Adrian stepped in smoothly. "We've been thinking about family a lot lately, about being closer, especially with Dad's condition." I glanced at Dad. His speech was still limited, but his sharp eyes flickered with something, confusion, maybe concern. Ivy's voice turned sugary. "We thought maybe we could move in here. Just temporarily, of course, to help out." Then I caught it, Adrian's quick glance in my direction, barely a second, but enough. "Sebastian's room would be perfect for us," Ivy added. "He works remotely. He can do that from anywhere." The kitchen went silent, save for the faint sizzle of forgotten pancakes. Mom turned off the stove, her movements slow, deliberate. "Sebastian has been here, taking care of your father," she said carefully. "Every day. And we are grateful for that." Adrian's response was effortless. "Of course, and that's why we want to help. 2 able-bodied adults would be more useful than one. Plus, we could contribute financially." I had to bite my tongue. In the past 8 months, Ivy had visited exactly 6 times. 3 of those visits lasted less than an hour. Things escalated quickly after that. Over the next week, Ivy and Adrian were constantly around, showing up unannounced with excuses to wander through different parts of the house. I caught Adrian in Dad's study twice, both times claiming he was looking for a pen. The second time, he was by Dad's filing cabinet. Then came the comments, subtle at first, then bolder. "Must be nice living rent-free." Or, "Don't you think it's time you got your own place?" Always when our parents weren't around. But last night was what broke me. I was helping Dad with his evening physical therapy exercises when Ivy burst into the room with Adrian at her side. "We need to talk," she announced. I helped Dad settle into his chair, but before I could answer, Adrian blocked the doorway. Ivy crossed her arms. "You need to stop fighting this." "Excuse me? You're just a burden," Adrian added, his voice thick with contempt. "Almost 30, still living with Mommy and Daddy. Nobody wants you here." I studied them. Really looked at them. Ivy's designer outfit couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Adrian, usually polished, looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his expression strained. There was a desperation in them I hadn't noticed before. "If you really cared about this family," Ivy continued, "you'd step aside. Let people who actually know how to handle things take over." I glanced at Dad's chair. He had dozed off, thankfully spared from hearing his own children speak like this. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Something about their desperation triggered a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Instead, I went upstairs, packed a bag, and booked a nearby extended stay hotel. But before I left, I did 2 things. First, I ordered small security cameras, nothing fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things. Mom agreed when I suggested installing them for Dad's safety. The relief in her eyes told me she had noticed something too. Second, I made some calls to flag Dad's accounts for suspicious activity. Maybe I was overreacting, but catching Adrian near those financial documents didn't sit right with me. This morning I moved out. Ivy and Adrian looked triumphant, but something felt off about their victory. The way Adrian immediately started measuring the windows in my old room. The way Ivy was already talking about redecorating Dad's study. Now I'm sitting in my hotel room, watching the camera feed on my laptop. They think I've given up. They don't realize I've just moved my pieces into position. Mom texted me an hour ago. Adrian asked about your father's pension paperwork. Said he wanted to help organize things. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Sometimes, the best way to protect your family is to let others think they've won. But watching Adrian rifle through Dad's desk drawer right now, I know I made the right call. They wanted my room. They can have it. But they're about to learn why you should never underestimate the quiet one in the family. By the time I woke up the next morning, I had an overwhelming amount of evidence in my hands, and a sinking feeling in my gut. The cameras had captured everything, and what I discovered made my stomach churn. I spent most of the night reviewing the footage from my hotel room, my laptop screen casting an eerie glow in the dimly lit space. Around 11 p.m., after our parents had gone to bed, Ivy and Adrian had a conversation in what used to be my room. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but it was good enough. We don't have a choice anymore, Adrian muttered, pacing restlessly. The deadline's in 2 weeks. Ivy, sitting on the bed with her head in her hands, exhaled sharply. I know, but forging Dad's signature? Adrian, if we get caught, if we don't do this, we lose everything, he snapped. The house isn't just being sold, Ivy. We're being evicted. Do you want people to find out about that? I froze. They weren't selling their home at all. They were losing it. The conversation took a darker turn. Adrian ranted about a failed investment, enraged clients, and the mounting legal threats against him. The numbers he tossed around were staggering, the kind that could financially ruin someone for life. Your parents' house has so much equity, he continued. If we can just get the refinancing approved, but Sebastian's going to notice, Ivy interjected. He always checks their accounts. That's why we needed him gone, Adrian hissed. Look, I have the paperwork ready. We just need your dad's signature. Once we have that, we'll get access to enough money to cover what we need, and no one will ever know. I watched Ivy, my sister, the same girl who once snuck me extra cookies when Mom said no, nod slowly. What about the retirement accounts? She asked. That was all I needed to hear. I stopped the footage and immediately called the bank, not the local branch, but their corporate fraud department. Once I explained the situation, everything fell into place. Turns out, someone had already attempted to submit a mortgage application in Dad's name, but the bank flagged it because the signature didn't match their records. I spent the rest of the night documenting every detail, making sure I had a rock-solid case. The next morning, I met with an elder law attorney. The meeting was an eye-opener. What Ivy and Adrian were attempting wasn't just morally bankrupt, it was a federal crime. The attorney helped me file for an emergency guardianship hearing and contacted the relevant authorities. Then, I decided to dig into Adrian's background. What I found was astonishing. Public records revealed a pending investigation against him for financial misconduct. Multiple former clients had filed complaints. His company had been quietly scrubbing negative online reviews mentioning his name. I knew I had to tell our parents, but I needed to be smart about it. Instead of confronting Ivy and Adrian outright, I waited until they were conveniently house hunting, and went home. When I arrived, Mom was in the kitchen, gently guiding Dad as he practiced using his adaptive utensils. The scene was so normal, so peaceful, it almost broke me. They had no idea what was happening behind their backs. Sebastian? Mom looked up, surprised. I thought you were staying at the hotel for a while. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my laptop, and played the footage. Mom went pale. Dad's hands trembled, not from his condition, but from pure rage. "There's more," I said. "Mom, remember those papers Ivy asked you to sign? The ones about helping with bills?" Her eyes widened. She grabbed her purse, rifling through it until she pulled out a stack of documents. My attorney had warned me about this. Power of attorney forms. Property transfer documents. Loan applications. All waiting for signatures. "I almost signed them yesterday," Mom whispered. "Ivy said it was to help with Dad's medical expenses." Dad, his voice steady but filled with fury, managed to say what we were all thinking. "Stop them." I laid out the legal documents I'd prepared, papers that protected their assets, revoked any prior power of attorney, and alerted the bank about the fraud attempts. My parents signed everything without hesitation. As I write this, I'm still at the house. Ivy and Adrian will be back any minute. They have no idea their mortgage application was rejected. No idea about the cameras. No idea that in less than an hour, everything is about to be laid bare. Mom just answered the door. "The attorney is here, right on schedule." The car just pulled into the driveway. "It's time." The confrontation. Ivy and Adrian strolled in, laughing, shopping bags in hand. Carefree. Clueless. The moment they saw everyone gathered in the living room, Mom and Dad on the couch, me in Dad's armchair, and a suited man at the dining table with a pile of documents, their expressions shifted. Ivy's smile faltered. "What's going on?" Her voice wavered. Adrian, always quick on his feet, stepped forward. "Everything okay? We weren't expecting a family meeting." Dad, his speech stronger than it had been in months, gave them a single command. "Sit down." They obeyed. Mom was the first to speak, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "We know about the mortgage application, Ivy. The one with your father's forged signature." Adrian blanched. Ivy opened her mouth, but before she could speak, he cut in. "There must be some mistake." I pressed play on my laptop. The damning audio filled the room. Their own voices. Their own words. "You recorded us?" Ivy whispered, her face a mix of shock and betrayal. "After I found Adrian going through Dad's financial documents?" "Yes, I did." That's when it exploded. Adrian shot up, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "You had no right! This is an invasion of privacy. We could sue." "Sit down," the attorney snapped, cutting through his outburst. "Before we discuss the multiple federal crimes you've committed, let's go over your current legal situation." He laid out everything: the pending fraud investigation, the identity theft, the forged documents. Adrian, once so confident, shrank into the couch. Then came the real bombshell. The attorney had uncovered something even worse. Adrian had already opened 3 credit cards in Dad's name. He'd been draining them for months. Ivy turned to him, stunned. "You said we were just borrowing against the house. You never said, what was I supposed to do?" Adrian snapped. "After the investment went south, everyone wanted their money back. Your shopping sprees didn't help either." "My shopping?" Ivy's voice rose. "What about the gambling charges on our credit cards?" The floodgates burst open. They turned on each other, shouting accusations, unraveling every lie they'd ever told. Through it all, Dad sat silently, his face hard as stone. When the yelling finally died down, he spoke. "You tried to steal from us." "Daddy, no," Ivy sobbed. "We were desperate. We were going to pay it back." Mom's voice was ice. "With what money?" Silence. Then the attorney cleared his throat. "Here's what's happening. First, their accounts are locked. Second, the fraud has been reported. Third," he looked at Adrian, "the authorities have been notified." Adrian shot to his feet just as the flashing blue and red lights outside illuminated the room. 2 officers stepped out of their patrol car. Adrian turned to Ivy. "Tell them. We were just trying to help." But Ivy wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring at the floor, shaking. Minutes later, Adrian was in cuffs. That night, I found Ivy in my old room, clutching an old photo of us as kids. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't know about the credit cards," she said. "I knew we were in trouble, but I didn't know how bad. He kept saying he could fix everything." She never looked more lost. If only we had access to Dad's equity. I wanted to believe him. "Why didn't you come to us for help?" She looked up, her face a storm of shame and relief. Because admitting everything was falling apart meant admitting she had failed, that her perfect life was nothing more than a carefully curated lie. The police called this morning. They found evidence on Adrian's laptop, extensive financial fraud. He wasn't just stealing from family. His entire business was built on deception. Ivy is meeting with a divorce lawyer tomorrow. I moved back home today. My room still carries the faint scent of her perfume, but the shopping bags, gone. Mom has stress-baked enough cookies to feed an army. Dad has been quieter than usual, but when I sat beside him for our usual evening TV time, he gave my hand a squeeze. That small gesture spoke volumes. A family counseling session is scheduled for next week. Ivy agreed to attend. The attorney says there's still a long road ahead, legally speaking. But at least the immediate threat to our parents' finances has been neutralized. Sometimes, doing the right thing feels terrible. But seeing Mom sleep peacefully tonight, knowing their retirement is safe? It makes it all worth it. As for Ivy, well, her reckoning is just beginning. Final update: they say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, I spent 6 months in the kitchen. Dinner is finally ready. Remember Adrian? The man who tried to steal my parents' life savings and had the audacity to call me a burden? He's currently sharing a prison cell with someone who has no interest in his financial advice. But that's just the appetizer. Let me catch you up on how everything unfolded after my last update. I didn't just sit back and let the justice system do its thing. I got methodical. Remember those security cameras I installed? They captured everything. Every phone call Adrian made from our house. Every document he accessed. Every email he checked using our Wi-Fi. I hired a forensic investigator. What we uncovered? A gold mine. Turns out Adrian wasn't just stealing from family and clients. He was running a web of elaborate schemes. Offshore accounts. Fake companies. A trail of victims stretching back years. Each discovery felt like peeling away another layer of his deception. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember Ivy's obsession with flaunting their perfect life on social media? Designer clothes. Lavish vacations. That massive house they were so proud of? All paid for with stolen money. And thanks to something called proceeds of crime laws, everything had to be sold to compensate his victims. Ivy isn't walking away unscathed either. During the divorce proceedings, evidence surfaced that she knew way more than she ever admitted. The shopping sprees? Funded with stolen client money. The vacations? Paid for with elderly victims' retirement funds. Her carefully crafted social media persona came crashing down in spectacular fashion once the truth went public. And then I found it. A hidden laptop in our attic. Adrian had stashed it away in the chaos of moving. The files were encrypted, but I know people who know people. What we found inside? Better than Christmas. Hundreds of emails. Adrian bragging about manipulating my sister. His calculated plan to drain my parents' accounts. Spreadsheets detailing exactly how much he could steal before anyone noticed. I didn't keep it to myself. I sent copies to everyone. His family. His friends. His old college buddies. Every country club member he bragged to about being self-made. The responses? Satisfying. But the real fireworks were just beginning. Remember those clients he stole from? I tracked them all down. Made sure they had copies of everything, the evidence, the emails, his prison details. Many of them were elderly couples who lost their entire retirement. Others were small business owners who trusted him with their life savings. They formed a support group. And they're not just suing Adrian, they're going after everyone who benefited from his crimes. His parents, who lived in the vacation home he bought them with stolen money. They're losing it. His brother, who received shady investments for his startup. That company is being liquidated. And Ivy? She tried playing the victim card. The bankruptcy court wasn't buying it. Apparently, spending stolen money on designer handbags and luxury vacations isn't a good look when you're under financial investigation. She's working at a mall now. The same mall where she used to drop thousands on shopping sprees. Oh, and Adrian? His cellmates started sharing stories about him on prison forums. Apparently, he cries himself to sleep. His tough guy act lasted 2 days before reality set in. He tried using his financial expertise to gain respect. That didn't go over well. Fraudsters? Not exactly respected in prison. Meanwhile, Mom is finally smiling again. Dad's speech therapy is making real progress. Turns out stress was slowing his recovery. They're taking a vacation next month. Their first in years. I made sure it's paid for with legitimate funds. Unlike some people's trips. And that emergency guardianship I filed for? It's permanent now. I legally control all family financial decisions. Every penny Adrian tried to steal? Not only safe but already growing. The karma train wasn't done rolling, though. A documentary filmmaker reached out. They're doing a series on financial fraudsters. Adrian's case? Episode 1. I handed them everything. The recordings, the emails, the entire web of deceit. His face is about to be famous, just not in the way he planned. And Ivy? She called yesterday. Said she wanted to explain things. I agreed to meet. But not at home. We're meeting at the courthouse cafe. Fitting, don't you think? I've got a recorder ready. Just in case she tries to spin more lies. Adrian has 15 years to think about his choices. His appeals? Denied. His former clients are making sure his name is dragged through every financial forum, every investment group, everywhere he might try to rebuild after release. Sometimes I sit in my old room, the one they tried to take from me, and read letters from Adrian's victims. Letters thanking me for exposing him. Each one feels like vindication. The quiet one in the family? Not so quiet anymore. They wanted to destroy my family out of greed. Instead, they destroyed themselves. And I got to watch it happen, one perfectly legal, methodically planned step at a time. Dad said something interesting yesterday. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to them. He told me, his speech clearer than ever. It's making sure they live with what they did to themselves. I'm meeting Ivy in an hour. The recorder is charged. I've got copies of every document proving her involvement. Time to serve the final course of this cold dish. This will be my last update. Some stories end with forgiveness. This one ends with justice.